On this episode of Lost Gems, an overshadowed first-person shooter that rocked like the Iron Maiden album of the same name. We're exhuming Powerslave on Lost Gems 11. So today I'm bringing you Powerslave for the PC, Sega Saturn, and PlayStation 1. I've been working on this Lost Gem for a while now. Powerslave is a great game and I would have enjoyed going into more detail about it, but as I continued to explain the differences between all three versions, it was just beginning to look like a giant sloppy game review. So I decided to keep it simple without skipping on the more important details. Anyway, let's get started now. In 1993, Doom hit the gaming world like a Dick Cheney shotgun blast to the face. Doom as we know it was the game that made first-person shooters a popular genre on the PC gaming front. From 1993 to 1996, there was a wave of Doom clones utilizing the Doom engine that flooded the scene. Only a few games like Strife, Hexen, and Rise of the Triads were able to stand out in this sea of mediocrity. It wasn't until developers started building their own game engines that first-person shooters would start taking a turn for the better. Star Wars Dark Forces had the Jedi engine, Duke Nukem 3D had the Build engine, and Quake created the first true 3D experience with the Quake engine. All three said games were huge successes and easily overshadowed Powerslave. Powerslave was developed by Lobotomy Software and in its early development was meant for just the PC. In its alpha stage, it was called Ruins Return of the Gods and was using the Build engine. In fact, it was supposed to be published by Duke Nukem developer 3D Realms, but was dropped and then picked up by Playmates months later. After being picked up by Playmates, the development of a console version of Powerslave began for the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation. Unfortunately, the Build engine wasn't designed for consoles, so Lobotomy had to start from scratch and create a brand new game engine called the Slave Driver. The Slave Driver engine allowed for a more 3D atmosphere, similar to the Quake engine. It also allowed for enhanced dynamic lighting that the Build engine was just not capable of. The Saturn version was released in October of 1996, with the PlayStation version releasing a month later. Powerslave on the console played more like an adventure game than a true hardcore first-person experience. The player was allowed to travel back and forth between levels in a similar fashion to that of the Metroid series. The player was able to explore each level and find artifacts that enhanced the player's abilities and allowed for access to areas that were at first unreachable. The artifacts were able to increase your jumping ability, allowing you to jump higher and farther, staying submerged in water for longer periods of time, and even walking on lava with taking minimal to no damage. Oh, by the way, the late Don LaFontaine provided voiceover narrations for both versions of the game. Check this out.
During the time of the pharaohs, the city of Karnak was a shining example of civilization spreading to all neighboring lands. World leaders from all parts of the globe have sent forces among the living. The villager told horrifying stories of fierce alien creatures that invaded the city.
Starting out, the two versions looked almost identical, with the only differences being enemy placement and the PlayStation version having blue scorpions instead of red spiders. Later on, you do begin to notice the differences between the two versions. The PlayStation version had additional rooms and architecture, and several levels had completely different layouts compared to the Saturn version. Some of the other differences included better dynamic lighting on the Saturn version, exclusive power-ups that were only found on the Saturn version, and better graphical detailing on the PlayStation version. The PC version finally saw its release in December, just before the new year was ushered in. Right away, you can tell that the console and PC versions were two completely different animals. Aside from the different level structures and inferior lighting effects due to the Build engine, the PC version played more like a standard first-person shooter. You were able to travel back to earlier levels like you could on the console versions, but the game as a whole was more linear and did not require you to do so. One of the more interesting aspects of the PC version was the ability to regain health by eating berries that grew on plants scattered throughout the levels. This was not included in the console versions, and the only way you were able to regain health there was by grabbing glowing red orbs. Also, the PC only had half the artifacts that were available in the console versions. The missing artifacts returned to the spells that could be cast at any time by the player. And on a final interesting note, there was an ammo counter in the PC's HUD, or heads-up display. In the console version, ammo was kept track of with the blue mana bar and could be refilled by just picking up the blue orbs. In the PC version, you had to refill your ammunition by finding ammo clips or grenades that were lying around throughout the level. Despite how different all three versions turned out, all were still easily overlooked. Now, how could this have happened? Well, as I've mentioned before, there were two titles responsible for this: Duke Nukem 3D and Quake. Duke Nukem took the build engine to its limit, and with the help of its iconic hero who parodied 1980s action movies, the Duke became a surefire hit. And with the arrival and the hype surrounding Quake due to its true 3D environments and non-sprite-based enemies, that quickly turned itself into a hit as well. However, the work that Lobotomy Software put into Powerslave didn't go unnoticed. Sega liked how well the Slave Driver engine worked for the Sega Saturn and gave Lobotomy the rights, in an ironic twist, to develop ports of Duke Nukem 3D and Quake to the Sega Saturn. Sega then published both games and released them in late 1997. Sega was finally able to show the world that the Saturn was capable of doing 3D games and not just crappy arcade ports and horrible sprite-based RPGs. Unfortunately, it was too late for the Sega Saturn, which lost its support in 1998. As for Lobotomy Software, the company was working on a follow-up to Powerslave, but before they could do so, the company went under. No one knows if this was due to financial reasons or if the company just decided to disband. One thing is for sure, however, Lobotomy Software's work will always be remembered. Now, if you're interested in picking up a copy of Powerslave, make sure you check out eBay. They normally cost between $10 and $40 each, depending on the game's condition and platform. A word of warning for those who are hunting down the PC version, however: make sure you download the program DOSBox. Powerslave was only built for DOS and cannot run on Windows Vista or XP. DOSBox emulates the DOS environment and will allow you to play Powerslave perfectly. Anyway, this concludes today's Lost Gem, and I want to thank you for watching. Make sure you tune in for future episodes. If you have a game that you would like to recommend, please email me at hubsdoctor@gmail.com. I'm Fight Club Hubs. Thank you for watching. Keep on gaming.